Imagine walking into your dad's 60th birthday party, dressed to the nines, arm in arm with a gorgeous guy. Now, imagine that this guy is the exact same man your older sister has been delusionally obsessing over for the past 5 years. The look on her face when she saw us, the absolute horror, the pale cheeks, the way her jaw practically unhinged and hit the floor, is a core memory that I will cherish until the day I die. Why did I do it? Well, let's just say it was the ultimate payback. Because exactly 3 weeks before my dream wedding, I walked into my own apartment and caught my older sister making out with my fiancé on my velvet couch. And her excuse? She looked me dead in the eye, wiped her smudged lipstick, and said, "I'm sorry, Harper, but he just reminded me so much of Julian." Yeah, she slept with the man I was going to marry because he supposedly gave off the same vibes as a guy who ghosted her half a decade ago. If you love a good story about toxic family dynamics, shattered boundaries, and a petty nuclear revenge that completely destroys a narcissist's life, then grab a snack, hit that subscribe button, and settle in, because the story of how I nuked my older sister's fantasy world and watched her lose absolutely everything is going to be a wild ride. My name is Harper. I'm 26 years old, living in Chicago, and up until recently, I thought I had a relatively normal, albeit slightly annoying, and family life. But to truly understand the sheer audacity of what happened to me, you need to understand the absolute nightmare that is my older sister, Morgan. Morgan is 29, but emotionally, she's permanently stuck at a spoiled, entitled 16. In my family, Morgan has always been the undeniable golden child. Whatever Morgan wanted, Morgan got. If I got a B on a test, I was grounded. If Morgan failed a class, my parents would march down to the school and gaslight the teacher into believing it was their fault for not understanding Morgan's unique learning style. She is the dictionary definition of a narcissist, completely incapable of empathy and allergic to taking accountability for anything she does. But the real root of Morgan's brand of crazy, the absolute core of her toxic personality, revolves around a guy named Julian. Let me take you back to 5 years ago. Morgan was 24, freshly graduated from college with a degree in something useless, and spending her weekends partying. One night, she meets Julian at a rooftop bar. Julian was, by all accounts, a catch. Tall, dark hair, incredibly charismatic, and working in finance. They hit it off, they had a few too many overpriced cocktails, and they ended up going back to his place for a one-night stand. In the normal world, a one-night stand is just that. You wake up, you do the walk of shame, maybe grab an iced coffee, and you move on with your life. But in Morgan's world, that single night was the universe aligning to bring her together with her twin flame. According to Morgan, they stayed up until 4 a.m., talking about their childhoods, their deepest fears, and their dreams. She claimed he looked into her eyes and told her he had never felt a connection like this before. The reality, he probably just wanted to get her into bed. The next morning, Julian called her an Uber, gave her a polite hug, and said, "I'll text you." Spoiler alert, he never texted. Actually, it was worse than that. When Morgan bombarded his phone with 50 text messages over the next 3 days, ranging from, "Had such a great time," to, "Are you ignoring me?" to, "I know you felt what I felt," Julian did the only logical thing a sane person would do. He blocked her on everything: iMessage, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. He wiped her from his digital existence. Instead of taking the hint, this rejection completely broke something in Morgan's brain. She decided that Julian didn't block her because he wasn't interested. Oh no. In her twisted, delusional mind, Julian blocked her because the connection was too strong. He was intimidated by the intensity of their love and needed time to heal his past traumas before he could fully commit to her. From that day forward, the legend of Julian became the governing force in our family. For 5 years, Morgan used the ghost of Julian as a get-out-of-jail-free card for every terrible, toxic thing she did. If she couldn't hold down a job, it was because she was too heartbroken over Julian to focus. If she got obscenely drunk at family gatherings and started screaming at people, my parents would pull me aside and whisper, "Just let it go, Harper. You know she's still grieving her soulmate." My parents were her biggest enablers. They tiptoed around her delusions like she was a fragile piece of glass. They never told her to go to therapy. They never told her to move on, and they certainly never established any boundaries. But the absolute worst part was how Morgan used Julian to sabotage my life. You see, Morgan couldn't stand it when I was happy. If the spotlight wasn't directly burning her retinas, she threw a tantrum. When I was 22, I brought my first serious boyfriend, Noah, home for Thanksgiving. And Noah was sweet, a little shy, and wore glasses. He looked absolutely nothing like Julian. But halfway through dinner, Morgan started crying hysterically at the table. She ran upstairs, locked herself in her room, and refused to come out. When my mother finally coaxed the truth out of her, Morgan claimed that the way Noah laughed sounded exactly like Julian, and it triggered her PTSD. My parents, instead of telling her to grow up, asked me to take Noah and leave early. It's just too hard for your sister right now, Harper. My mom sighed, looking at me with those pleading eyes. Please be the bigger person. Noah broke up with me 2 months later, citing that my family dynamic was too intense. That was the moment I realized I had to protect my life from Morgan. I learned the hard way that if I had something good, Morgan would find a way to destroy it, and she would use Julian's ghost as the bulldozer. So I learned to keep my distance. I moved into a great apartment downtown, focused on my career in marketing, and put my family on a strict information diet. I rarely talked about my personal life. And then I met Carter. Carter was everything I thought I wanted. He was stable, kind, incredibly handsome, and treated me like a queen. We met through mutual friends, and the chemistry was instant. But because of my history with my unhinged sister, I made a conscious decision. I was going to hide Carter from my family for as long as humanly possible. For 2 entire years, my family had no idea Carter existed. We built a beautiful, solid foundation, completely isolated from the toxic radiation of my parents and Morgan. It was peaceful. It was perfect. When Carter finally got down on one knee in the middle of a snowy evening in Millennium Park and asked me to marry him, I said yes without a single hesitation. I was on top of the world. I thought I had outsmarted the system. I thought my relationship was bulletproof and that Morgan couldn't touch me anymore. I genuinely believed that my happily ever after was secured. But I was an idiot, because the thing about narcissists is that they have a sixth sense for your happiness. They can smell it like a shark smells blood in the water. And once my engagement was officially announced and I finally had to introduce Carter to the family, the countdown to the ultimate betrayal began. I just didn't realize that my fiancé, the man I trusted with my entire soul, was weak enough to fall into her trap. Introducing Carter to my family was like tossing a perfectly good piece of steak into a shark tank. I had successfully hidden him for 2 years, but once that diamond ring was on my finger, keeping him a secret was no longer an option. We had to do the obligatory meet the parents dinner. I prepped Carter for weeks. I warned him about my parents' lack of boundaries, and most importantly, I warned him about Morgan. I told him she was manipulative, that she thrived on drama, and that she would probably try to find a way to make my engagement about her. Carter, sweet, naive Carter, just kissed my forehead and said, "Babe, you're overthinking it. I can handle your sister." Oh, how wrong he was. The first time Morgan laid eyes on Carter, I saw a shift in her demeanor. Usually, when I introduced a friend or a boyfriend to the family, Morgan would put on her bored princess act, rolling her eyes, checking her phone, and sighing loudly until everyone asked her what was wrong. But with Carter, she was practically vibrating with a weird predatory energy. She immediately insisted on sitting next to him at the dinner table. Throughout the entire meal, she kept finding excuses to touch his arm. She laughed a little too hard at his jokes, continuously flipped her hair, and kept steering the conversation toward deep, emotional connections. At one point, she looked Carter dead in the eye and asked, "So, Carter, do you believe in twin flames? Because I think some souls are just magnetically drawn to each other, no matter who gets in the way." I kicked him under the table, signaling him to tread lightly. Carter awkwardly laughed it off and grabbed my hand, saying, "I just believe I got lucky finding Harper." Morgan's smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a tight, plastic smirk. Right, lucky. Over the next few months, as wedding planning kicked into high gear, Morgan's behavior escalated from slightly annoying to genuinely unhinged. She would randomly text Carter at 11 p.m. asking for advice on fixing her laptop. She would show up at our apartment unannounced to drop off wedding magazines, always fully glammed up and wearing way too much perfume. I brought it up to Carter multiple times. I told him her behavior was crossing a major boundary and making me uncomfortable, but Carter just brushed it off. He hit me with the classic gaslighting lines. "Harper, you're being paranoid. She's just lonely. She's your sister. She's just trying to bond with me. Don't be so insecure." I let him convince me that I was the crazy one. I convinced myself that my past trauma with Morgan was making me project things that weren't there. I focused on the wedding. The venue was booked, the dress was altered, and the invitations were sent. We were 3 weeks away from walking down the aisle. And then came a random Tuesday afternoon. I was supposed to be at the office until 6 p.m., but around noon, I started feeling awful. My throat was on fire, my head was pounding, and I was shivering uncontrollably. I told my boss I was coming down with the flu and decided to head home early to sleep it off. I didn't text Carter because I knew he was working from home that day, and I didn't want to bother him while he was in his Zoom meetings. I dragged myself up the stairs to our apartment building, practically sleepwalking. I fumbled with my keys, quietly unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The apartment was dead silent, no sound of typing, no muffled voice from a conference call. But there was something else, a smell. It was the overpowering, suffocating scent of Morgan's signature vanilla and patchouli perfume. My stomach dropped. Every alarm bell in my head started screaming. I slipped my shoes off and walked silently down the hallway toward the living room. And there they were. On my custom emerald green velvet couch, the couch I had spent months saving up for was my fiancé, and straddling his lap with her hands tangled in his hair and her shirt completely unbuttoned was my older sister. They were so aggressively going at it that they didn't even hear me drop my purse. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. They froze. Carter's head snapped toward me, and the color instantly drained from his face. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. He practically shoved Morgan off of him, scrambling backward on the couch like a cornered rat. "Harper, oh my God, Harper, wait, it's not what it looks like," he stammered, frantically trying to fix his clothes. "It's not what it looks like?" I repeated, my voice terrifyingly calm. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. It felt like my soul had temporarily left my body, like leaving behind a cold, calculating machine. "You are literally half naked on our couch with my sister 3 weeks before our wedding. What exactly does it look like, Carter?" He started hyperventilating, spitting out word vomit about how it was a mistake, how he was stressed about the wedding, how she initiated it, how it meant absolutely nothing. He was pathetic. But Morgan didn't panic. She didn't scramble to cover herself up. She didn't look ashamed. She slowly buttoned her shirt. It smoothed down her hair and let out a long, theatrical sigh, as if I had just inconvenienced her. She stood up, walked over to the coffee table, picked up her designer purse, and then she looked me dead in the eye. "I know you're upset, Harper," she said, her voice dripping with that fake, condescending sweetness she always used when she was playing the victim. "But you can't really blame us. You have to understand, he just reminded me so much of Julian." The silence in the room was deafening. I stared at her. I literally felt a blood vessel throb in my temple. "Julian?" I whispered. "Julian, the guy you slept with once half a decade ago? You're screwing my fiancé because he reminds you of a guy who blocked your number in 2019? "You wouldn't understand," Morgan replied, completely unfazed, lifting her chin defiantly. "You've never experienced a true cosmic connection. When I look at Carter, I feel Julian's energy. It's not our fault that the universe brought us together. You should honestly be happy that I finally found my closure." The sheer audacity of her words was so mind-blowing that I actually let out a short, hysterical laugh. She was dead serious. She had completely rationalized destroying my life because of her psychotic obsession with a ghost. I turned my attention back to Carter. He was sitting on the edge of the couch, holding his head in his hands, crying. Get out," I said. The tone of my voice was so icy it could have frozen hell over. "Harper, please, we can do couples counseling. We can fix this," Carter begged, reaching a hand out toward me. "If both of you are not out of my apartment in the next 60 seconds, I am calling the police and telling them there are 2 trespassers in my home," I interrupted, grabbing my phone and dialing 911. 55 seconds. They saw the psycho in my eyes and realized I wasn't bluffing. Carter grabbed his jacket and keys, practically sprinting out the door without looking back. Morgan strutted out behind him, completely unbothered, pausing at the door to say, "We'll talk about this when you're less emotional." And then the door clicked shut. I was alone. I stood in the middle of my living room for a long time. The smell of her perfume was still lingering in the air. The cushions on my velvet couch were still indented. My life, my wedding, the future I had planned, it was all gone. Burned to the ground in less than 5 minutes. A normal person would have collapsed on the floor and cried until they threw up. A normal person would have called their mom or their bridesmaids and canceled the wedding right then and there. But as I stood there staring at the spot where they had just betrayed me, I didn't feel sadness. I felt something much, much darker. Morgan had taken everything from me. She had used the ghost of Julian to terrorize our family for 5 years, and now she had used it to steal my fiancé. She thought she had won. She thought I was going to tuck my tail between my legs, cry to my parents, and let her walk away unscathed while I played the broken-hearted victim. She severely underestimated me. I walked over to the couch, grabbed a trash bag, and shoved the velvet cushions inside. Then I sat down at the kitchen island, opened my laptop, and typed a single name into the Instagram search bar. Julian. If Morgan wanted to play games using Julian's name, then it was time to bring the real Julian into the chat, and I was going to burn her entire delusional world straight to the ground. Finding Julian on Instagram took exactly 3 minutes. Even though it had been 5 years since his legendary one-night stand with my sister, Morgan had stalked his digital footprint so aggressively over the years that I knew his full name, his current employer, and his exact username. His profile was public. He looked exactly like I remembered from the blurry screenshots Morgan used to force me to look at. Tall, sharp jawline, and genuinely way out of her league. But more importantly, he looked normal. He had pictures with his golden retriever, pictures hiking with his friends, and pictures with his family. Nothing about this guy screamed tortured soulmate hiding from a cosmic connection. My hands were shaking as I clicked the message button. I didn't want to sound like a lunatic, but I also needed him to know this wasn't a casual hello. I took a deep breath and typed, "Hi, Julian. My name is Harper. I'm Morgan's younger sister. I'm so incredibly sorry to bother you. And I know she's completely unhinged, but she just used your name as an excuse to sleep with my fiancé 3 weeks before my wedding. I want to ruin her life, and I think you might want her to finally leave you alone. Let me know if you're open to a coffee. Drinks are on me." I hit send, closed my laptop, and finally let the tears fall. But I wasn't crying over Carter. I was crying out of sheer, unadulterated rage. I expected to wait days for a response, or maybe even get blocked myself. But less than 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a DM notification from Julian. "I am so sorry about your engagement. That is awful. And honestly, I have been waiting for someone in your family to reach out to me for 5 years. Meet me at the Starbucks on 4th and Pine in an hour." An hour later, I was sitting across from the mythical Julian in a crowded coffee shop. Up close, he was even more handsome, but he looked incredibly exhausted when I mentioned my sister's name. I spilled everything. I told him about the velvet couch, about Carter's pathetic excuses, and about Morgan looking me dead in the eye and saying Carter reminded her of Julian. When I finished, Julian ran a hand down his face and let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Harper, you have no idea. You think she's just delusional at home? She is a borderline stalker." And then Julian dropped a nuclear bomb on me. He told me that after he blocked her 5 years ago, Morgan didn't just sit in her room and cry. She found out where his mother lived. For the last 3 years, Morgan had been sending handwritten, perfumed letters to his mom's house in the suburbs. She introduced herself as the girl Julian is too scared to love and begged his mother to help him see the light. "My mom is a 65-year-old retired teacher, and she's terrified," Julian explained, his voice tightening with anger. "Morgan even showed up at my mom's church once. I tried to get a restraining order last year, but because she hadn't explicitly threatened violence, the cops said there wasn't enough for a rock-solid case. They just told me to ignore her. I was actually going to hire a lawyer next month to send a cease and desist." My jaw was practically on the floor. I knew Morgan was toxic, but I didn't know she was straight up terrorizing an innocent elderly woman. "She thinks you're pining for her," I told him. "She genuinely believes you're staying away because the love is too intense." "Well, how do we shatter that illusion?" Julian asked, leaning forward, his eyes suddenly burning with a very specific, vindictive energy. "Because I want her out of my life. And my mom's life. Permanently. You said you want to ruin her. What's the plan?" That was the moment the alliance was born. Two victims of Morgan's absolute insanity, teaming up to deliver the ultimate reality check. I laid out my idea. In exactly 5 days, it was my dad's 60th birthday. My parents were hosting a massive catered lunch at their country club. The entire extended family was going to be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. Everyone who had enabled Morgan's behavior for years, and everyone who thought she was just a fragile, heartbroken angel. "I need a date," I said, looking Julian right in the eyes. "I need you to walk into that country club holding my hand. I need you to look at her like she's a complete stranger, and I need you to act like you are head over heels, disgustingly in love with me. I want her to watch the love of her life treat the sister she hates like absolute royalty." Julian didn't even hesitate. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face. Harper, I will be the greatest fake boyfriend this world has ever seen. I'll even buy a new suit. With the plan in motion, I had one extremely difficult task ahead of me for the next 5 days. I had to employ the gray rock method. If you don't know what gray rocking is, it's a psychological technique used to deal with narcissists. You essentially become as uninteresting, unresponsive, and emotionless as a literal gray rock. Narcissists feed on drama. They want you to scream, cry, and fight them because it makes them feel powerful and important. If you give them absolutely nothing, they don't know what to do. For 5 days, I turned off my emotions. Carter bombarded my phone with hundreds of texts and voicemails. Harper, please, it was a mistake. Harper, I canceled the caterer. Please talk to me. Harper, I love you. I didn't block him because I needed the evidence, but I never responded. I let him scream into the void. But Morgan was the real test. 2 days after the incident, she texted me, "Hey, Mom wants to know if you're coming to Dad's birthday lunch. We really need to talk about what happened. Carter is a mess. You need to be an adult and face this." The audacity made my blood boil. She was trying to frame me as the immature one for catching her sleeping with my fiancé. I wanted to text back a paragraph full of expletives. I wanted to tell her to go to hell, but I took a deep breath, channeled my inner gray rock, and typed back, "Yes, I'll be at the lunch." That was it. No emotion, no anger, no questions. My parents called me incessantly, and Morgan had clearly spun a narrative to them, claiming that Carter came onto her, or that it was a mutual mistake of passion, and that I was overreacting by kicking him out. My mother left a voicemail saying, "Harper, honey, please, cancel the wedding if you have to, but don't let a boy tear you and your sister apart. You know she's emotionally fragile." I didn't call them back. I went completely dark. By the time Friday rolled around, Morgan and my parents were convinced that I had given up. They thought I was sitting in my apartment crying over my ruined wedding, too embarrassed and broken to fight back. They thought I was going to show up to the birthday lunch looking like a defeated, miserable victim, ready to accept their toxic apologies and sweep everything under the rug to keep the peace. They had absolutely no idea that while they were busy making excuses, I was out shopping for a killer new dress. And they definitely didn't know that Julian and I had spent the last 3 evenings getting to know everything about each other, our favorite foods, our childhood stories, our pet peeves, so that when we walked through those country club doors, our chemistry would be absolutely undeniable. The stage was set, the trap was laid, and Morgan was about to walk right into a public execution. The day of my dad's 60th birthday lunch arrived, and the weather in Chicago was perfectly crisp and sunny. The venue was an upscale country club my parents had been members of for years. It was the kind of place with overly manicured lawns, crystal chandeliers, and a room full of people who cared way too much about keeping up appearances. Normally, I would dress conservatively for these family events to avoid my mother's critical eye or Morgan's snide comments. But not today. Today, I was going to war. I wore a sleek, backless emerald green slip dress that fit me like a glove, paired with strappy gold heels. I looked expensive, I looked confident, and most importantly, I looked completely unfazed by the fact that my life had supposedly imploded 5 days ago. Julian picked me up in his impeccably clean Audi. When I walked out of my apartment building, he actually let out a low whistle. "Okay, Harper," he smirked, getting out to open the door for me. "If the goal is to cause a narcissistic collapse today, I'd say you're fully armed and ready." "Just wait until we get inside," I replied, feeling a genuine smile cross my face for the first time in a week. "Remember the game plan?" "I'm the completely obsessed, doting boyfriend who only has eyes for you," Julian recited smoothly, "and I have absolutely no memory of any cosmic connection with a girl from 5 years ago. I got this." We arrived at the country club about 20 minutes late. Fashionably late, of course. I wanted everyone to be seated and mingling so that our entrance would have maximum impact. We walked through the grand double doors of the banquet hall, Julian's hand resting firmly, possessively on the small of my back. The room was buzzing with the chatter of about 50 extended family members and family friends. Across the room, I spotted my parents holding court near the bar. And right next to them, holding a mimosa and laughing way too loudly, was Morgan. She was wearing a white lace dress. Yes, white. Because of course she had to look like a pseudo-bride just in case anyone forgot she had successfully stolen a fiancé that week. I took a deep breath, leaned into Julian, and we started walking toward the center of the room. It happened exactly like a scene out of a movie. My Aunt Susan was the first one to notice us. She stopped mid-sentence, her jaw dropping slightly. Then my cousin David turned around. Then my mother. Like a domino effect, a heavy, suffocating silence swept across the banquet hall. And then Morgan turned around. If I could have bottled the look on her face in that exact second, I would have sold it for millions. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like she had seen a ghost. Her eyes darted from me to Julian, down to where his hand was resting on my waist, and back up to his face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The mimosa glass in her hand tilted dangerously, spilling a few drops onto the expensive carpet. My mother, completely ignoring the fact that she had begged me to cancel my wedding just days ago, plastered on a fake, panicked smile and hurried over. "Harper, sweetheart, you made it!" my mom squeaked, her eyes darting nervously to Julian. And who is this? Before I could answer, Morgan practically shoved my mother aside. She marched right up to us, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with a manic, desperate energy. She looked directly at Julian, completely ignoring my existence. "Julian," she breathed out, her voice trembling with emotion. "Oh my God! Julian, you're here. You actually came for me?" The silence in the room was deafening. Every single aunt, uncle, and cousin was watching this play out. Julian looked at her. He didn't look angry or scared or intimidated. He looked at her with the polite, slightly confused expression of a man trying to remember the name of a distant acquaintance he met once at a networking event. "I'm sorry," Julian said, his voice calm, steady, and projecting perfectly across the quiet room. "Do I know you?" Morgan physically recoiled as if he had just slapped her across the face. "What?" "Julian, it's me, Morgan. From the rooftop bar? We have a connection. You know we do? Why are you pretending? Why are you here with my sister?" Julian let out a soft, all-amused chuckle, pulling me a little closer to his side and kissing the top of my head. "Oh, right, you're Harper's older sister. She mentioned you. Nice to finally meet you. And to answer your question, I'm here because I'm absolutely crazy about Harper." He looked down at me with so much fake adoration in his eyes that I almost believed it myself. I wouldn't miss a chance to support her at a family event. Boom. The absolute devastation that washed over Morgan's face was almost hard to watch. Almost. For 5 years, she had built her entire identity around the delusion that this man was secretly pining for her, that their love was too epic for this world. And in 10 seconds flat, in front of the entire family, he had just publicly reduced her to, oh right, Harper's older sister. "Excuse me," Morgan choked out. Tears sprang to her eyes. She turned on her heel and practically sprinted out of the banquet hall, on pushing past a waiter and disappearing down the hallway toward the restrooms. My mother immediately started hyperventilating. "Harper, what are you doing? Who is this man? Why is he doing this to your sister? You know how fragile she is about him." I looked at my mother, channeling my inner gray rock. "Mom, this is Julian, the guy I've been seeing. I don't know what Morgan's problem is, but maybe she shouldn't project her delusions onto my date. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to get a drink." For the next hour, Julian put on an Oscar-worthy performance. We sat at our table and he doted on me relentlessly. He pulled out my chair, he kept my wine glass full, he laughed at my jokes, and he casually brushed my hair behind my ear while talking to my uncles about golf. Everyone at the table was completely charmed by him. They were whispering about how much of an upgrade he was from Carter, completely oblivious to the radioactive drama simmering beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Morgan had returned to the room. She sat at the opposite end of the hall looking like a drowned rat. Her makeup was smudged, her white lace dress looked ridiculous, and she was downing glasses of white wine like they were water. She kept shooting me these toxic, venomous glares, but every time she tried to catch Julian's eye, he completely ignored her. Eventually, I saw her stand up unsteadily and head back toward the bathrooms. This was my moment. The main course was over, and it was time for dessert. "I'll be right back," I whispered to Julian. He gave me a knowing nod. I followed Morgan into the opulent marble-lined ladies' room. She was leaning over the sink, gripping the edges so hard her knuckles were white, staring at herself in the mirror. When she saw me walk in, she spun around, her face twisted in pure, unadulterated hatred. "You bitch," she hissed, the fragile victim mask completely slipping. "You vindictive, psychotic bitch. You planned this. You hunted him down just to hurt me because you're jealous that Carter wanted me instead of you." I walked over to the sink, turned on the tap, and calmly washed my hands. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at her through the mirror. Carter? I laughed softly, drying my hands with a paper towel. Morgan, do you honestly think I care about Carter? A spineless coward who would sleep with his fiance's mentally unstable sister on a Tuesday afternoon? You didn't win a prize, Morgan. You took out my trash. Her face turned beet red. Shut up. Julian loves me. He told me. You manipulated him into this. I turned to face her, leaning against the marble counter, my arms crossed. Julian doesn't love you, Morgan. Julian thinks you are a terrifying, unhinged stalker. He told me everything. He told me about the letters you've been sending his mother for 3 years. He was actually going to hire a lawyer to send you a restraining order next month. That made her stop. Her eyes widened, panic finally piercing through her delusion. You're lying, she whispered, her voice shaking. Try me. I stepped closer, dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. You have used him as an excuse to ruin my life, to demand attention, and to justify every horrible thing you've ever done. And now everyone knows the truth. They all saw it out there. He doesn't even care enough to remember your face, Morgan. You mean absolutely nothing to him. And now you mean absolutely nothing to me. I didn't wait for her response. I turned around and walked out of the bathroom, leaving her completely alone with the shattered pieces of her pathetic, delusional reality. I walked back into the banquet hall, took my seat next to Julian, and picked up my fork to eat a piece of my dad's birthday cake. It tasted sweeter than anything I had ever eaten in my entire life. But the show wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, because Morgan was a cornered animal, and I knew she was about to make one final fatal mistake. If you think a narcissist gives up after one embarrassing public confrontation, you have never dealt with a true narcissist. After the bathroom incident at my dad's birthday lunch, Morgan went completely radio silent for 3 days. My parents were tiptoeing around, whispering on phone calls, clearly trying to figure out how to spin the narrative to make Morgan the victim again. But I wasn't going to let them control the spin. It was time to drop the first nuclear bomb. On Tuesday evening, I decided to make my relationship with Julian Instagram official. I chose a candid, gorgeous photo from the country club. Julian was looking down at me, laughing with his arm wrapped securely around my waist. I looked happier than I had in years. I didn't write a shady caption. I didn't mention Carter or the cheating or Morgan. I just kept it simple and classy. Unexpected beginnings. So glad you're here. At Julian. I hit post, tagged him, and waited. It was a digital mousetrap. And I knew exactly which rodent was going to take the cheese. It took exactly 42 minutes. My phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Morgan had commented on the photo. Now a smart person would have stayed quiet. But Morgan, fueled by pure, unadulterated delusion, decided to double down. Her comment read, "It's honestly so sad that you have to pay a guy to pretend to like you just to make me jealous. Stop embarrassing yourself, Harper." He literally texted me last night. We're fine. I was sitting on my couch with a glass of Pinot Noir, reading the comment, and I actually started cackling. She had handed me the exact weapon I needed on a silver platter. I screenshotted the comment and texted it to Julian with a single word. Ready? Julian replied 3 seconds later, say less. 2 minutes later, Julian replied directly to Morgan's comment on my public Instagram post, and he didn't hold back. He went straight for the jugular. At Morgan, I haven't spoken to you, texted you, or willingly been in the same room as you in 5 years. What is actually sad is that you have been stalking me and sending unhinged perfumed letters to my 65-year-old mother's house for the last 3 years. I'm having my lawyer draft a formal cease and desist order on Monday. Please seek immediate psychiatric help and stay the hell away from me and Harper. Boom. The fallout was instantaneous and catastrophic. My post was public. My entire extended family follows me. My cousins, my aunts, my high school friends, and most importantly, all of Morgan's friends. Within 10 minutes, my phone was practically melting from the incoming notifications. The family group chat, which had been dead silent since the birthday lunch, suddenly exploded. Aunt Susan, "Oh my God, is this true? She's been harassing his mother?" Cousin David, "Bro, what is happening right now?" My mom, "Harper, delete that post immediately. We do not air family business on the internet." I didn't delete a single thing. Instead, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, finished my wine, and went to sleep like a baby. Morgan's fragile, heartbroken angel mask hadn't just slipped. It had been shattered into a million pieces for the entire world to see. But the grand finale, the absolute climax of this entire saga, happened 4 days later at my older cousin Amanda's wedding. Amanda's wedding was a massive 200-person affair at a downtown Chicago hotel. Because it was a family event planned months in advance, Morgan was still invited. I knew my parents had begged Amanda to uninvite me to keep the peace, but Amanda, who had always secretly hated Morgan's main character syndrome, refused. She actually called me and said, "If you and Julian don't show up and serve looks, I'm going to be pissed." So we showed up, and we looked incredible. When we walked into the reception hall, the energy immediately shifted. People were literally turning in their chairs to stare at us. The whispers were deafening. Everyone had seen the Instagram comment, everyone knew the tea. And then I spotted Morgan. She was sitting at a table near the back looking completely isolated. For the first time in her life, the golden child had no audience. Her friends had mysteriously lost her in the crowd, and even my parents were keeping their distance. I too deeply humiliated by the stalking allegations to coddle her publicly. She looked miserable, wearing a dark, heavy dress that looked like she was attending a funeral rather than a wedding. For the first 2 hours, she avoided us. Julian and I danced, we drank champagne, and we genuinely had an amazing time. It was terrifying how easy it was to be around him. The fake dating was starting to feel suspiciously real, but I pushed that thought aside. We had a mission to finish. Around 9 p.m., the DJ slowed the music down, and the dance floor cleared out a bit. I told Julian I was going to run to the restroom and grab us some fresh drinks from the bar. When I came back, the trap had been sprung. Morgan had cornered Julian near one of the large floral centerpieces. She had him boxed in, her hands frantically gesturing, her eyes wide and wet with tears. I stopped about 10 feet away, hidden slightly behind a pillar, watching the train wreck unfold. Several other guests at nearby tables had also stopped talking and were blatantly eavesdropping. "Julian, please," Morgan was begging, her voice cracking. "I know why you wrote that comment. I know you're just trying to protect me from your own intensity, but you don't have to push me away anymore. I forgive you. Just give me 5 minutes in private. Please, my soul is literally breaking." She reached out and tried to grab his hand, while Julian stepped back so quickly he nearly knocked over a glass of water. His face wasn't polite anymore. It was cold, hard, and filled with absolute disgust. He didn't whisper. He didn't try to keep his voice down. He spoke loud enough for our entire half of the banquet hall to hear him clearly. "Morgan, are you completely deaf or just dangerously delusional?" Julian's voice sliced through the background music like a knife. Morgan froze, her hand still hovering in the air. "What? I am not protecting you. I'm actively trying to get a restraining order against you," Julian stated, his tone dripping with venom. "You slept with your own sister's fiancé, and you used my name as the excuse. You are a toxic, manipulative person, and the very sight of you makes my skin crawl." Tears started streaming down Morgan's face. She looked around, realizing that at least 20 people, including our parents and Aunt Susan, were watching this unfold in dead silence. "But our connection?" she whimpered, grasping at the last dying thread of her fantasy. Julian let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "There is no connection, Morgan. There never was. You were a bad one-night stand 5 years ago. That is it. Now back off, stop talking to me, and leave us alone. Because frankly, I'm a little too busy falling in love with your sister to deal with your psychotic breakdowns." Mic drop. The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Morgan stood there, utterly, completely destroyed. She looked at Julian, then her eyes darted to the crowd. She looked at our mother, silently pleading for her to step in, to scold Julian, to do something to save her. But for the first time in 29 years, my mother did nothing. She physically turned her face away, staring at the floor, her cheeks burning with shame. The crowd of relatives just stared at Morgan with a mixture of pity and severe judgment. There was no one coming to her rescue. The enablers had finally tapped out. Morgan let out a strangled, pathetic sob. She turned around, grabbed her purse from a nearby chair, and practically sprinted out of the ballroom doors. She didn't look back. I stepped out from behind the pillar and walked over to Julian. The surrounding guests suddenly found their drinks very interesting and went back to their own conversations, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a live murder. Julian looked down at me, his chest heaving slightly from adrenaline. He reached out, gently took my hand, and pulled me close. "Did I go too far?" he whispered, a slight smirk playing on his lips. I looked up at him, my heart doing a very unexpected, very genuine flutter. "You were perfect," I smiled. The witch was dead. The dragon was slain. Morgan had been completely exorcised from my life. Her reputation left in absolute ashes. But as I stood there holding Julian's hand, listening to the soft jazz music floating through the ballroom, I realized that my revenge plan had created a massive, unforeseen complication. Because when Julian said he was busy falling in love with me, I was pretty sure he wasn't acting anymore. The fallout from Cousin Amanda's wedding was nothing short of spectacular. If my dad's birthday lunch was the earthquake, the wedding was the tsunami that completely wiped Morgan off the map. Monday morning, right at 9 a.m., Julian wasn't bluffing. He lawyered up. His attorney sent a massive, terrifyingly official cease and desist letter to Morgan, outlining every single instance of harassment, including the letters to his mother. The document essentially stated that if she ever breathed in his or his family's direction again, they would drag her to court so fast her head would spin. For the first time in her life, Morgan faced actual legal consequences, and it broke her. Without the delusion of Julian's epic love to prop up her ego, and with the entire extended family now fully aware of her psychotic behavior, Morgan completely unraveled. Her friends, the ones who had listened to her whine about her twin flame for half a decade, dropped her like a bad habit. They realized she wasn't a heartbroken romantic, she was a manipulative liar who had actively seduced her own sister's fiancé. She became a social pariah overnight. Unable to handle the shame and the complete lack of attention, Morgan ended up quitting her job and moving out of state. Last I heard, she's living in a tiny apartment in Arizona, working some dead-end retail job, and posting vague, depressing quotes on Facebook that nobody likes or comments on. The golden child finally fell off her pedestal, and nobody was there to catch her. But Morgan wasn't the only one who tried to crawl out of the wreckage. About 2 weeks after the wedding, I heard a pathetic, hesitant knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole, and there he was. Carter. He looked terrible. He had dark circles under his eyes, his hair was a mess, and he was holding a sad-looking bouquet of grocery store roses. I opened the door just a crack, leaving the chain on. "Harper, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I heard what happened at the wedding. I heard how crazy she is. You have to believe me. She manipulated me. She gaslit me into thinking our relationship was falling apart. I was weak, and I made a mistake, but I love you. We can still get married." I looked at this man, the man I had hidden from my family for 2 years to protect him, and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just pity. "Carter," I said, my voice deadpan, "you are a grown man. You didn't trip and accidentally fall onto my velvet couch without your shirt on. You made a choice. You don't get to blame my sister's mental instability for your lack of loyalty. You're just a coward who got caught. Take your cheap roses and never come back here." I shut the door in his face and locked it. I never heard from him again. Dodging that bullet was the greatest blessing of my entire life. Then, there were my parents, the ultimate enablers. With Morgan out of the state and their family reputation in tatters, my parents finally woke up and smelled the coffee. They tried to initiate contact with me. They sent long and groveling text messages apologizing for misunderstanding the situation and begging me to come over for Sunday dinners again. They wanted to pretend that everything could just go back to normal now that Morgan was gone. But that's the thing about boundaries. Once you realize how peaceful life is without toxic people constantly crossing them, you never want to go back. I agreed to meet them for coffee one last time. I sat across from them and laid it all out. I told them that their refusal to hold Morgan accountable had destroyed our family. I told them that they had sacrificed my happiness for 26 years just to keep Morgan from throwing tantrums, and I was done paying the price for their bad parenting. "I love you," I told them, picking up my purse. "But I am going strictly no contact for the foreseeable future. I need space to heal from the trauma you allowed her to inflict on me. Do not call me, and do not show up at my apartment." Watching my mother break down in tears was hard, but walking out of that coffee shop felt like dropping a 100-pound weight off my shoulders. I finally chose myself, and as for Julian, well, that fake relationship didn't stay fake for very long. After the wedding, we went out for drinks to celebrate our victory. But the conversation didn't revolve around Morgan or Carter or revenge. We just talked. We talked about our careers, our favorite movies, our travels. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. When he walked me to my door that night, he didn't give me a polite hug. He looked at me with those intense, gorgeous eyes, leaned in, and kissed me. And let me tell you, there was absolutely nothing fake about it. We started dating for real. We took it slow, completely aware of the insane circumstances that brought us together, but the connection was undeniable. It turns out, when you strip away the drama and the toxic family interference, building a relationship with someone who respects you, protects you, and matches your energy is actually incredibly easy. It's been a year and a half since that chaotic birthday lunch. I am sitting in my new living room on a brand new non-velvet couch, typing this out. Julian is in the kitchen cooking us dinner, and his golden retriever is currently snoring on my feet. Morgan thought she was going to ruin my life by using the ghost of her past. Instead, she handed me the keys to my absolute perfect future. She got exactly what she deserved: a life of isolation built on a foundation of lies. And I got the happily ever after she was so desperate to steal. So, if you're listening to this and you're dealing with a toxic, narcissistic family member, let me give you the best advice you will ever hear. Stop trying to keep the peace. Draw your boundaries in permanent marker. Go gray rock, go no contact, and don't ever let them convince you that their delusions are your reality. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing them, it's living a beautiful, peaceful life that they no longer have access to. Thank you guys so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this wild ride, make sure to smash that like button, drop a comment down below telling me how you would have handled Morgan, and subscribe for more crazy Reddit stories. I'll catch you in the next one.